Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is, Saturday? No, it's not Saturday. Gosh, I don't know what day it is. Tuesday. It's Tuesday, obviously, July 1st, Canada Day 2025. Sorry, I didn't know which day it was. And there's a by-election that was called yesterday in Battle River, Crowsfoot. And so that's interesting. Mr. Polyev is going to be running in that. And we'll see how that all goes. I don't know. The prediction is probably that he'll win, but won't it be interesting if he doesn't? We'll see how that all works out, right? And what else is going on? Trump and Carney I've got some more stuff with the trade interaction, a little bit of stuff beforehand to remind us that Trump wasn't just targeting the digital service tax, the DST. He said all of the supply management stuff. He wants milk. He said Canada charges too much for milk access, and we want that. So it's going to be interesting to see. Carney also talked about bringing back Parliament to pass legislation to allow the DST to not be passed. And so will we get another signing ceremony thing, very Trumpian signing ceremony from Mark Carney, or is he just going to do it how we do it here in Canada by convening Parliament and voting on it? I don't know. Who knows? We'll watch and see. E-Safety Commissioner in Australia goes after free speech. There's a whole lot of attacks on free speech. The Senate is talking about C8 is a mirror of C26, and C26 died on the order paper, but it was a very flawed bill, and the Privacy Commissioner said that certain amendments needed to be made, and those amendments weren't made, so on and so forth. So we'll talk about all of that. Free speech is definitely being targeted at this point in time. And it seems like Trump is ushering in a counterbalance, as I am currently streaming on YouTube. So that's different than it was not very long ago. So I don't know. And I don't even know if it's Trump. I don't know what changed, but something changed. And now my YouTube channel's back. So it's very, very, very strange. And I don't know what the play is. Because on one side, it looks like they're going after free speech with a whole bunch of legislation and excuses around safety. And, for your safety, comrade, we have to remove your ability to talk about anything or whatever. And on the other side, it seems like they're opening up free speech again, where they shut me down and other people like me who questioned things that they didn't want questioned in a public forum. So I have no idea which way it's going, but all of these things are happening, and I thought I'd point them out. Interprovincial trade barriers are not gone, but Chrystia Freeland says they are. I can't find the list of interprovincial trade barriers that they've gotten rid of, but Chrystia Freeland made a big announcement. CTV reported it, CBC reported it, everybody's talking about it. I can't find the list of the specific things that they've undone. It's like, you wouldn't even be interested. Don't worry about it. I am interested. Where's the press release? I can't even find the press release. Maybe my Google foo is failing me. Who knows? CDC covered up autism, says Secretary Kennedy on Tucker Carlson, and he's very, very clear. I've got the whole interview for you from yesterday and the clip where he says the CDC was covering up autism that was being given to kids through the Hep B vaccine. And so that's pretty wild. $670 billion is how much in failed contracts that the Trudeau government has cost Canada so far, the Trudeau Liberals and now the Carney Liberals. So that's a lot of money. That's a lot of cheddar. And at the end of the show, we've got a moment of Zen with musical mushrooms, and it's amazing. So there's a whole lot to get to. First, let's get to it. First, we have to start with yesterday was my birthday, and I had a wonderful birthday. It was fantastic. I did everything that I like to do. It was a perfect day on steroids. So I even had a Slurpee. So it was wonderful. And I found out, and I didn't know this, that yesterday is also Thomas Sowell's birthday. So happy 95th birthday to Thomas Sowell yesterday. And here's a picture of him hanging out with his wife, Mary Sowell, at his birthday luncheon. And that's pretty wild, right? I didn't know I shared a birthday with Thomas Sowell. So good for him for hitting 95 years old. I hope, man, fingers crossed, right? So cool birthday buddy to have. Here is Canada Day, talking about being reported in the National Post, and National Post is reporting, I'm skeptical of the things that I read in the newspaper because the newspapers burn me so many times. There's so many things that the newspaper writes that I know ain't so, right? I know that's not true, the newspaper, right? Like the people who are telling you to write this are lying to you, and you're lying to us on their behalf. And you don't have questions about that, the newspaper. So I'm very skeptical to read the newspaper. And here's the National Post, and they say, Canadians are proud to be Canadian. A huge majority declare it, even with concerns of affordability, what it means to be Canadian, and a loss of shared collective identity. Okay, happy Canada Day with your concerns of affordability and not knowing what it means to be Canadian and loss of shared collective identity. But we're super proud of being Canadian. Woo! Yay, Canada! Happy Canada Day. Aw, the fireworks are canceled too? Doh. Right? So, yeah, happy Canada Day despite all those real big headwinds, right? It seems very strange. Here's champagne. And to be clear, I'm proud of the little slice of Canada that I've got with my family, right? I'm proud of us and all the rest. But Canada that I remember, does that still exist somewhere? Maybe in the small rural towns it might, but man, it doesn't. It feels less and less like the place that I grew up. And so I don't know about this poll of people being proud to be Canadian. I've seen a lot of people who are saying, man, when does this 51st state thing kick in? I don't know. But we'll talk about that a little bit during the trade section. Here is Champagne, and he's the finance minister, and he's talking about Mark Carney's tax cut that was supposed to be $890 a year per couple, and which ended up being $300 per year per couple, which is a lot less. Not even $290. I'm giving too much credit. Apologies, but $300 a year? Really? This is supposed to be the big tax cut that you're touting as a big crowning jewel of the newly selected government. Ryan is responding to this, and this is a quote from Champagne. Starting tomorrow, Canada Day, today, Canadians will keep more of their hard-earned money thanks to our middle-class tax cut. This is about fairness and about building a stronger economy. And Ryan says, I thought it was $277 saved in 1 year per couple is about fairness and building a stronger economy. This is insulting. And yeah, it's pretty insulting. So, yay, Canada. Pride in Canada evaporating. Oh, shucks. Here's Prime Minister Carney, and this is talking about the election being called in Battle River, Crowfoot. Prime Minister of Canada announces that a by-election will be held on August 18th, 2025 in the electoral district of Battle River, Crowfoot in Alberta. So there you go. There's a by-election called immediately, and there's that. And here is, I talk often about different ways the elections are rigged. Faith Goldie had rigged elections because Bell Media refused to run her ads. I think Rogers took her money but then didn't run her ads. And that's in contravention of the Elections Act. Other candidates had their ads run, but they wouldn't run Faith Goldie's ads. There are other ways that elections are stolen out of constituency voting. Creates a black box in every constituency with an unknown number of votes. And so after you get the totals, you now know the number you have to beat. And so this black box becomes important because how many votes are in there? Well, maybe enough to turn it, right? And so you count until you have the outcome you want. And there are many other ways. Drop boxes were used in the United States, Dominion counting machines, and this is an example of Dominion counting machines doing things they're programmed to do, but nobody is forthcoming about that programming. Peter says, huge breaking news. Logs obtained from ES&S voting system shows votes being injected well in excess of ballots cast at the county level. Ballots 2, total 510, means 2 blank ballots fed into the system generated 510 votes. From line 538049 of ES&S log November 22nd midterm elections. This is happening in several states. Maryland is another one of them. Kudos to Chris Gleason, who discovered blank ballots, which are not really blank. Paraphrasing, Crook Craig, supervisor of elections, was hiding massive election fraud. Ballots cast blank shows up in the logs of Hillsborough County, Florida in 2018, 2020, and 2022, where in the 2024 November election, Craig got more votes than Trump or Harris, needs to be investigated by Director Kash Patel. When a voter or election official feeds a paper ballot into a tabulator, it's scanned and then converted to digital. Right here is where the chain of custody is lost because those digital ones and zeros can now be made to do anything. Votes are not counted from those ones and zeros, so ES&S Voting Machine Company has 2 electronic files in their computerized tabulator's code. It could be your ballot, the electronic image of it, which is sent to the secondary file named blank ballots, yet you have no clue it's happening. These blank ballots are then adjudicated, meaning someone else besides the voter is determining who you voted for. Here, it is using blank ballots as a template to inject votes into the EMS at the county level. That is what these records Chris obtained show. No wonder why ES and S want to hide the audit logs. Ballots equals 0, total 1914. 0 ballots, but 1,900 votes. Ballots 8, total 4,058 votes. 8 ballots, 4,000 votes. So ballots 8 means 8 blank ballots, then total 4,058 is the total number of votes. Of course, you're not going to get 4,058 votes off of 8 ballots, but you will if you're injecting votes. Look at the logs yourself in the quote tweet of Chris's here. It's the EL68A system logs. One image posted shows one of the pages. See where it says vote exceeds ballots over and over and over. There's a 101-page article on our website explaining this in detail. Runbeck is in on it and others where their software is used to adjudicate these blank ballots. Look for blank ballots and election fraud article. So it's interesting, and I think that there are a lot of different vectors to change elections if they want to, and I think that in Canada they use a whole bunch of them to the degree where they have a lot of control, to the degree where they can put in whoever they want wherever they want. I think here's Rupert, and he's talking about the invasion ongoing. Rupert is an MP in the United Kingdom in England, and he says let's ban the burqa. And ban the burqa is he's got Restore Britain, and it says both the burqa and the niqab are fundamentally un-British and have no place on our high streets. Countries across Europe, including France, Belgium, and Austria, have already banned the burqa. The safety and dignity of women and girls must not be sacrificed on the altar of multiculturalism. An overwhelming majority of Brits back a ban. So Harper, I think, suggested this, and he got absolutely torched for it. Interesting that it's coming up in England now, because I feel like this would be even more politically difficult to do in England now. Because have you seen images of London or any English city? It's pretty wild. Here's what's happening in BC. The real Mr. Bench said, should temporary modular housing, is it being built by Brookfield? Should temporary modular housing for the homeless be built across the street from a high school and inside a park? That's exactly what is happening or what BC Housing is planning in Abbotsford, British Columbia. And there was another one with actual video, like first-person video from the park walking to the school. And the distance from the park to the school is much closer than it appears in this satellite image of the location from above, right? And so it's very concerning. And why are our elected officials trying to jam in as many people as they possibly can near schools and places where people would go and congregate, where if you were to attack them, it would be very bad. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, anybody getting attacked anywhere is bad, but probably a daycare is worse. You know what I'm saying? And a high school would be not very good, right? So it would be high on the list of things that would be politically difficult, but a lot of people would get upset about that kind of stuff, right? Another school shooting, but if it's migrants attacking a high school or placing a bomb or something to that effect, people would get very upset about that. So why is the deck being stacked? Why are the dice being loaded for that? Let's talk about trade. And Donald Trump got rid of the DST, but when he was talking about this, it wasn't just the DST that he had his sights set on. He wanted to get rid of other taxes too, and he specifically mentioned dairy and supply management. And Holly Doan this is 6:30 a.m. on June 30th, yesterday, and she says President Trump cites Canadian dairy quotas in a threatening new round of tariffs by July 4th. Remarks Friday came the same day Bloc Québécois MP celebrated passage of private bill shielding milk producers from trade concessions. Now, I don't think this is new. I think this is zooming in on the other aspect of things. I don't know. I mean, maybe. And if Donald Trump says you've got until July 4th to remove those dairy tariffs, or we're just going to stop trade negotiations and your entire country is going to go in the shitter, and that's that, and they reconvene cabinet and get rid of the dairy cartel, that would be wild, right? Like that would be one wild ride. And who do you have to thank for it? I mean, the only person we have to thank for the digital service tax being removed is Donald Trump. Biden wouldn't have stopped it, right? So Food Professor says, breaking on Fox News. This is June 29th at 4:23 p.m. Again, zooming in on the dairy aspect of this. Trump declares that trade talks with Canada will not resume until Ottawa drops certain taxes, specifically targeting those on dairy, eggs, and poultry. And when you go to the article, it's a Globe and Mail article. When you go to the article, it's talking about the DST, and the DST is the headline, and then the dairy and stuff is secondary. Here's Carney talking about that they're back on track and they're going to have a deal by July 21st. And he's not talking about milk. Brian Lilly says Carney doesn't look overly confident as he has to admit his climb down. So we'll see. Again, not much about milk here, but if Trump wanted to, well, here's the Food Professor, and he highlights this pretty well. He says, think about this. Canada is one Truth Social post away from plunging its dairy sector into political and economic chaos, and Trump wouldn't be the one to blame. The industry has spent years resisting reform and ignoring the deep flaws in its system. Yep. So I find that true and pretty funny. Here is Mark Carney talking about the outcome of the of Trump's ultimatum and what happened. And somebody's asking him, I think you can hear it, but somebody asks him, what did Canada get for this? And he pivots and doesn't really have a good answer. Here you go.
Did you get anything in exchange for?
We have, to be clear, it's part of a bigger negotiation. It's something that we expected in the broader sense that would be part of a final deal. We're making progress towards a final deal. There's more to be done, to be clear. And as I just said, which answers the translation question, as I just said, is a question of timing in terms of the date for the final negotiations and when the tax was coming into effect. And it doesn't make sense to collect tax from people and then remit them back. So
hold on, what did you hear? It doesn't make sense for people to collect tax from people and then just remit them back? Like, that doesn't make sense? What are okay.
Provides some certainty. And as I just said, negotiations have restarted. We're going to focus on getting the best deal for Canadians. We're making progress. There's more to do, and we'll keep you updated.
The White House says, did you get anything in
So, more to do. We'll keep you updated. No real updates here. Here is the press secretary talking about this. Daisy Media is sharing it. I think she's answering a question here.
Prime Minister Carney in Canada caved to President Trump in the United States of America. And President Trump knows how to negotiate, and he knows that he is governing the best country and the best economy in this world, on this planet. And every country on the planet needs to have good trade relationships with the United States. And it was a mistake for Canada to vow to implement that tax. That would have hurt our tech companies here in the United States. The president made his position quite clear to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister called the president last night to let the president know that he would be dropping that tax, which is a big victory for our tech companies and our American workers here at home.
There you go. So President Trump created that
Prime
situation.
Minister Carney in Canada caved.
And Carney caved. Food professors, yeah, I've already said that. Sorry, moving on. Here is Ryan. He says, let's revisit what the media pushed endlessly for months to Canadians. The guy hasn't been able to deliver a single win for Canada. CBC was saying Mark Carney has what it takes to deal with Trump, says Manitoba politicians. Carney is the best leader to navigate Trump chaos, says new poll. I'm not making the case that Pierre Poilievre would have done anything different. I'm not making that case. I'm just saying that it's funny that everybody and their dog, Globe and Mail to the Gazette to CBC News, so all government paid off people, were making the case that Carney's the right guy. He's going to stand up to Trump. He's going to be tough. He's going to not let Trump get away with it, right? And Carney's calling Trump to say, yes, sir. You're right, sir. We'll definitely repeal that tax, sir. And so that's really different than what we're sold, right? That's really different than what the media tried to claim was going to be how Carney dealt with Trump. So weird. CBC News says the federal government says it's removed all interprovincial trade barriers under its jurisdiction. And so I read the article, and I was looking, and I thought there's got to be more to this article because the article's empty. There's very little in the article. But it says the federal government says that it's removed all interprovincial trade barriers under its jurisdiction. Ottawa has eliminated the remaining federal exceptions from Canadian Free Trade Agreement CFTA Internal Trade Minister Chrystia Freeland said in a press release Monday. Of the 53 exceptions removed, most of them focused on procurement, according to the press release. There's no link to the press release that I could find here. I was like, where's the press release? Can I see a picture of the press release? Where's the list of the things that because I wanted to make fun of the list. Like that's really the bread and butter of this show. I wanted to point at the list and laugh and have you all laugh along with me. But of course, I can't find the list. So frustrating. But I find it more strange that they don't even have a link to the list. Anyway, throughout the spring federal election campaign, Mark Carney and the Liberals, and Mark Carney as Liberal leader, repeatedly vowed to eliminate interprovincial trade barriers and create free trade by Canada Day. Whoops. But Canada's internal trade barriers won't all be eliminated by then, not even at all the federal ones. Canada's supply management systems for dairy products, which sets provincial production quotas, will remain. Quebec also has language requirements that will stay in place. Provinces have announced steps to reduce their own interprovincial trade barriers in recent months. So yeah, great article. And then I looked on the search engines and really couldn't find anything. Here's CTV's article. They didn't have a link to the press release either. They didn't have a list for me to look at and laugh at. So I'm disappointed in the media. It doesn't quite cut it. Okay. This is my hobby. Okay. I'm doing this because I enjoy it and it's fun. And holy cow, can you believe what's going on? Right? Like that's why I do this. But the people who are paid to do this are not doing their jobs. They're not at all. They're starting their YouTube channels and navel gazing. It's very weird. Anyway, let's do our grab bag of governance. We've got time, I think, today. I think we've got time today. Oh, you know what? Actually, I'm not even going to cut the show today because it's Canada Day 1, and I have to get out of here, so I don't have time to do post-production. So I'm just going to do the full show, and there's not going to be any kind of break at all. So we're not going to cut it off at all, I don't think. So let's carry on. CBC to do our grab bag of governance. CBC Watcher says, just for fun, here's a list of questions that a paid subscriber suggested. Many in the media, not all of course, would have been asking had it been a conservative prime minister making news in Europe last week. So right. And I'm saying that the media doesn't do its job at its basic level. There are questions that should be asked. And when the politician avoids the question, you should say, great, that was a wonderful talking point, but like, how about this? Now, the politicians are responsible for limiting their ability to do that, like follow-ups, no follow-ups, all sorts of other stuff. I get that. But the questions asked are soft often. Here are 5 or 6 questions that may have been great for the media to ask. 1, please explain why Canada is the most European country outside of Europe. Follow-up, why does it matter? Because we're in Canada and geography really matters in trade. Right? Anyway, 2, is this the end of decolonization? Because we're obviously the most European of non-European countries. So are we not talking about this whole colonization thing anymore? And what does this mean about past commitments to indigenization? Where does this leave land acknowledgements? Great question. I thought, wow, bravo. If somebody asked that, they'd probably be blackballed. You're never welcome here. That's racist. Rah, rah, rah. Immigration to Canada from Europe is at an all-time low. Do you plan to prioritize immigration from Europe? Because, of course, being the most European of non-European countries, it makes sense to prioritize our immigration from Pakistan. What? On what date were your European citizenships revoked, Mr. Carney? 5, will you be bringing King Charles to Canada more often? 6, is Canada becoming more militaristic under your government? Yeah, tomorrow is July 1st. Happy Euro Canada Day. Right. Or Dominion Day. Oh, Dominion Day would have been a better title. Oh, well. And so it's very interesting what's going on with our government and the abdication of our press to government propaganda. Very, very sad to celebrate on this Dominion Day 2025. The real Mr. Bench says timeline. This is, grab bag of governance. So this is just random things that are happening around Canada. Carney during the election, or maybe, no, not even during the election, June 12th, timeline of the CAF pay increases. He announced that there was going to be a pay increase and then isn't going to follow through, like in very short order. June 12th, Carney announces Canadian military personnel to get a 20% pay increase. And McGuinty, who's the minister in charge of that, claimed it was immediate. June 17th, Carney gives $4.3 billion in military support and loans to Zelensky in Ukraine. June 23rd, David McGuinty is unsure when pay raise may happen, if ever. So that's concerning. Government changing tune on 20% pay hike for Canadian Forces personnel. they were saying they were going to look into if they could do something and give them value rather than money. And I was like providing sleeping bags. Come on, right? Like awful. So our government is using money that was maybe dog-eared for a pay raise for the military for Ukraine, and nobody can hold anybody accountable. Nobody would know anyway because there's no budget, I guess. So there you go. When you don't have a budget, you can just retrack $4.3 billion away from the Canadian military and to the Ukrainian military for reasons that you don't have to explain to anybody. Cool. Lori says, didn't the feds and Ontario earmark up to $15 billion in subsidies for Stellantis and LG Energy Solutions to produce EV batteries? Stellantis ramps up gas-powered vehicle production at Windsor Assembly Plant. Stellantis is making gas-powered vehicles? The strength of Tesla's vehicles is not in the battery. It is in the computer system that drives the car. And if you could put that into a gas-powered car, holy smoke, you got a money printing machine. Jeepers creepers, right? Or even better, if you could retrofit the computer, if you could retrofit the driving mechanism, but I fear that it's all over the car and it's deeply embedded, right? So like the car's got sensors that a regular car doesn't have. So you have to put those sensors in place, and presumably you have to put mitigation factors in place. Like if snow or ice builds up on a bumper over top of a sensor, you have to have some kind of way to melt that snow and ice to make that sensor work again, right? So to make it viable. So, and I think Tesla has probably solved a lot of those problems, and I don't know how to retroactively put that on my car, right? I've got a minivan, right? A 1997 Astro, and putting it on my Astro, that's not going to be easy. Okay. So it's one of those things that I look at Tesla and I don't think, man, that battery's great. I think to myself, that technology is wonderful, and I wish that it was more generalized. And how could you possibly do that? But it's interesting that these guys are moving into making gas cars. So forget batteries. Batteries are the past. The future is gas-powered vehicles. Yes, true. The real Mr. Bench again says, is Carney taking Canada down the same path as Jaguar? Now, this is just a weird kind of update that coincides with the EV thing and all of the rest of it. So the EV plants that we've invested billions of dollars into are retooling for gas. And Jaguar tried to go EV and absolutely destroyed their business. Like, it's jaw-dropping. I had to fact check this because I thought there's no way that's true. Here's the meme. It says, Jaguar tried to rebrand and wiped itself off the map. After ditching gas engines to go all electric, sales nosedived 98%, turning a legendary car brand into a ghost in the showroom. From 31,000 cars a year to just 360, this isn't a pivot, it's a full-blown collapse. Yeah. Wow. Is that happening to Canada? And are they trying to fix it by having Stellantis retool into a gas-powered thing? Like, holy smoke, did you see what happened to Jaguar? We gotta figure this out, right? Because we got $15 billion to figure it out, so we could probably figure something out. What do? Sell gas cars. Love it. Nailed it. Here's the fact check, and this is just Brave search engine, and it says Jaguar's sales in 2025 have seen a significant decline, particularly in Europe. In April 25, Jaguar recorded only 49 new vehicle registrations across Europe, a 97.5% drop from the 1961 units sold in the same month in the previous year. Year-to-date sales from January to April 25 showed a 75.1% decline, with just 2,665 units sold across the continent. Yeah? Really? Okay. 2,665. Okay. Additionally, Jaguar's sales in May 25 were reported to be 0 units, contributing to a broader decline in Jaguar's total retail volume, which fell 24% year on year to 4,623 units. So, wow, right? Like that's an epic decline. And so is somebody looking at this and saying, holy cow, we're going to have $15 billion of worthlessness, or we could do something different, right? Maybe not too, though. But I find that to be an interesting update to the Jaguar story. Holly Doan is reporting 2 climate programs launched on $300 million promise of new jobs and lower emissions could prove neither after 7 years. Managers stopped collecting data that would establish whether taxpayers received value for the money. And so they just stopped collecting data. If they're not collecting data, they can't tell you one way or the other if it's working or not. And so what kind of jobs have been created in the last 2 years? Oh, sorry. Well, there's just insufficient data on that. Next question, right? How convenient. How convenient that there's just no data. And so we'll never know if there was any kind of value for money or if it created any jobs at all because they're not counting. And that's a good way to make sure you continue getting funding for programs that fail because nobody's going to know. And how could you hold anybody accountable if you don't know whether it was successful or if it failed, right? Aaron Gunn's responding to Czech News. This is about BC Ferries. And I guess this should have been closer to the EVs. Anyway, BC Ferries is now prohibiting many electric vehicles from sailing on board its vessels due to a Transport Canada regulation preventing damaged vehicles from being transported. And Aaron Gunn says this should pair magnificently with the Liberal plan to force everyone to buy an electric car within the next 10 years. Damaged vehicles? Are electric vehicles classed as damaged vehicles or potential to cause fire or something like that? I mean, they do have potential to cause fire in a way that gas vehicles don't. And so I could see this being accurate. I just don't understand quite how the damaged classification comes into it. Because if I bought an electric car, like if I had a Volt or something like that, or a Tesla, and they said, you can't bring that on here, it's damaged, I would say it's not damaged. This is factory fresh, whatever it is. It's not, I've never been in an accident. I haven't even hit the curb type deal. It's not damaged. And so I don't know what the person preventing me from boarding would say to that, right? So I'm not sure how that works, but that's what they're saying. So weird, right? And yeah, can you imagine if you have to buy an electric car and because no electric cars are allowed on BC ferries, you can't take your car on the BC ferry? That would be annoying, right? Here is Politics UK, and they say the Lib Dems have called on the government to hold a COBRA meeting over the ongoing heat wave. COBRA is like a high-level meeting talking about, what are we going to do about this type thing? And I talked about it before, but it was established post-2000. It's been established for a while, and I thought the name was strange, and people were making fun of me for being suspect on the name. Anyway, they carry on. Sarah Onley, MP, the Lib Dem Cabinet Office spokesperson, said the government must convene COBRA to ensure it's not caught flat-footed as temperatures rise. We need urgent coordination to protect lives, keep essential services running, and ensure our NHS isn't overwhelmed. We're already experiencing the second heat wave this month alone. And extreme weather events are on the rise. This impacts everyone from the health of the elderly and vulnerable to the safety of children in our schools and the security of our crops. The government must be taking proactive steps to secure national infrastructure and build resilience in the face of this onslaught of heat. And there are a bunch of people who responded to this with the history of heat waves in the United Kingdom, and like this one's not even as hot as it was 2 years ago or something like that. There was a 37-degree day a couple of years ago within spitting distance. Like it wasn't that long ago. And they're running around like their hair's on fire. And it's just propaganda to get people on board and believe that this global warming, climate change thing is something that they need to be concerned about, one. And two, that somehow paying taxes to bureaucrats is going to fix it. Because it sure isn't. Anyway, Real Mr. Bench again is sharing this clip talking with Mike Myers. And this sounds, I'm not going to play this. It sounds like the most disingenuous story ever, but it's talking about his appearance on SNL, and at the end of credits where he opened up his Canada, his vest to display his Canada shirt. And then he started putting his elbows up like that. And it's the most ridiculous, contrived interview I've ever heard. This guy's acting like Mike Myers is some kind of hero. He's like, why did you put your elbows up, at the end of that SNL thing? Why did you do that? And Mike Myers is like, oh, well, I just kind of did it. And he said, oh, I'm so surprised. So the whole thing seems so contrived, like they're trying to draw attention to this. Mike Myers is washed up, man. The last Mike Myers movie that I watched, I thought, man, That sucks to see somebody who's so funny wash up so badly. And this was 2008's Love Guru, I think. So awful. I think it turned it off. I was like, this is the stupidest movie I've ever seen. Maybe not quite. But I don't care. And it's very interesting because this is not news. And yet they're trying to force it into the public like people care about this stuff. And I don't care. This is interesting. I care about the crime that's going on. Canada Crime Watch says Peel Regional Police are trying to identify a man after reports he was taking photographs and approaching children at a park in Brampton earlier this month. Police received 2 separate reports in early June about the same elderly man at a park near 590 North Park Drive. On both occasions, the man allegedly asked the children where they lived and whether they wanted to go with him, a police release states. In one instance, the man was accompanied by an elderly woman and an adolescent girl while walking in the area of Meriden Road. The interactions made the children uncomfortable, and they reported the incidents to trusted adults. The man is described as South Asian, between 60 and 70 years old, with a thin build and white medium-length beard. He was wearing traditional Indian clothing and kurta pajama and a black vest and a turquoise or green turban. Peel police stressed that no criminal offenses have been alleged, but they're looking to speak to the man and woman to better understand the nature and intent of the interactions. So there you go. Weird stuff going on. And it's frustrating because when you're a parent, you hope parks are kind of safe places, but then very, very strange people start congregating there. Also, I saw a post recently from somebody talking about how groups of men are congregating in Edmonton Mall, West Edmonton Mall. People are there's like 5 or 6 men standing around often. And I noticed that in Guelph too. That's happening in Guelph as well. You walk around, you drive around, you see 4 or 5 men walking around, 4 or 5 men just kind of standing there, just not doing anything. And it's a very, very interesting, demographics wise. What are you doing wise, right? Very, very strange. So things happen and you ask questions and then you get painted with all sorts of brushes, but you don't get any answers. Jim McMurtry, who is a teacher who was fired for pointing out that the residential schools have not produced any evidence to back up their claims, and he's told this to his students and he was fired. He's pointing out the hypocrisy and the difference between conduct and what that conduct gets you consequence-wise. Jim says, a teacher says to a student, quote, "Get to work or I will kill you." 1 day suspension. What? What do you mean by kill? Can you clarify into this camera here, sir? I said correctly, Jim said, that students in residential schools weren't murdered by their teachers. Lifetime ban. Done. You're done. Get out, sir. Get out. And he highlights this. Get to work or I will kill you. Really? Student A reported feeling uncomfortable and awkward as a result of this. I'm pretty sure you're not allowed to kill me, sir. So this is weird for you and me now. So thanks for that. Very strange. The Canadian government is going after free speech. I am confident. I am supremely confident that they're going after free speech. And C8 is a mirror of C26. And Denise Batters highlights this. And she's asking the Senate leader, who I think retires today. I think Senator Gold is done as of today. But anyway, I could be wrong about that. She's asking him, what's going on with this? And he says, no, it's super important that we have the tools to fight the extremism online. You know, all those people who dare to question vaccine mandates and free speech crackdowns and stuff. Here's this.
Senator Gold, the cybersecurity bill in the last parliament, Bill C-26, was 8 years in the making. The government forced the Senate to pass the bill in 3 months, only discovering at the final stages that their own massive drafting mistake required a last-minute amendment. The Liberal government then decided to prorogue and then called an election, so it died on the order paper. Now this Liberal government is trying to resurrect essentially the same highly flawed bill. In a recent media article, a legal expert described Bill C-8 as a, quote, almost verbatim copy of Bill C-26, saying, quote, it's the same bill back from the dead. This Liberal government pledged to do politics differently, yet they are the same old Trudeau-era cabinet ministers pushing the same old flawed Trudeau legislation. So how can you call this Canada's new government when it's just the same old, same old?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question, and you won't be surprised if I don't agree with some of the premises underlying the question. This is an important bill. The Senate did its job as it was asked to do in the last Parliament. The government is reintroducing this important bill, and I look forward to this chamber's study of that bill when it does arrive, if and when it does arrive from the House.
Senator Batters.
That's right. The Senate committees do study legislation for weeks, hearing expert witnesses suggest improvements, and yet this Liberal government then still regurgitates the same old legislation. Prorogation and dissolution were the deliberate choices of this Liberal government. You had 6 additional months to actually fix this bill. The new bill does not even include an amendment that the Privacy Commissioner of Canada testified is required. It seems CEO Carney prefers a rubber stamp. Either this government values the work of the Senate or it does not. Which is it?
Senator Gold.
This government is determined to provide Canada with the legislation that it needs to address the issues of the day, including the growing and broadening range of issues that cybersecurity addresses. And once again, Parliament will do its job to review the bill. The Senate will do its job, and if improvements are needed, I have every confidence the Senate will propose them.
Great. Every confidence the Senate will propose them. I don't have confidence that the Senate will do anything to reform or meaningfully stall the proposals by the Carney government, because the Senate was basically put in there by the Trudeau government. Sorry, there's a piece of something on my microphone that I have to get it off. Anyway, Trudeau stacked the Senate, and he knows that those senators are going to do what they're told, and what they're told is whatever the Liberal government pushes through the House of Commons. And so I'm not confident at all. Anyway, Darren says ex-boss admits to room of journalists that his employers at Sky News and ITV, which are 2 big broadcasters in the United Kingdom, pushed fake news to achieve paid-for agendas. In this case, medical agendas. Turn off your TV. You're being lied to about everything, while the really important stuff is omitted. Yeah. Yep. I think that's absolutely true. And I don't know how to maybe pushing fiction out that wraps these conspiracies in a fictional kind of shroud would be a good way to introduce this to the public, because it seems like they'll reject it if you try and tell them this is happening. But if you put a fictional world around it, then they'll read it and be like, wow, this is pretty egregious. This would never happen in reality, right? And then you could say, actually, I don't know. This guy's accent is a little bit thick, and the audio is not quiet, but it's a little underwatery, so I'm not going to play it, but you can listen to it on your own if you're interested. We'll carry on. Kurt says Australia's e-safety commissioner has just been named in a U.S. congressional report for colluding with foreign governments and corporate cartels to censor American speech. This is a diplomatic scandal and a threat for free speech worldwide. A thread. This isn't just a policy disagreement. Julianne Inman Grant has been caught coordinating with global bureaucracies and corporate activists to pressure platforms like X to silence speech even beyond Australia's borders. And now the world is taking notice. The U.S. House Judiciary Committee just published a 100-plus page report. It lays out how GARM, a WEF-linked advertising coalition, worked with Grant and others to blacklist voices that they disagreed with under the guise of brand safety. The goal, global censorship. Here's what the report says. Karen coordinated with GARM to influence her regulatory decisions. She demanded global takedowns of content, even in the U.S. She joined efforts to pressure X after the Musk takeover. This isn't just overreach, it's abuse of office. One example, after the stabbing of Bishop Mari Emanuel, Grant ordered X to block related content, not just in Australia, but globally. Even the victim opposed the censorship. An Australian court later ruled against her, but the damage was done. This kind of pressure campaign sets a chilling precedent. The unelected bureaucrats in Canberra can dictate what Americans are allowed to see online. No democratic nation should tolerate that. It's a direct violation of national sovereignty and free speech. The report also exposes GARM itself, a World Economic Forum-linked initiative backed by corporate giants like Bud Lights, AB, InBev, Disney, MasterCard, and more, aims to demonetize any content it deems harmful, including traditional views on gender, race, or faith. Far from being a neutral regulator, Julie Inman Grant openly praised GARM's power to hold platforms to account. She joined the networks now exposed for manipulating media and advertising to advance ideological goals. This is not online safety, it's ideological control. Yep, that's what they're aiming for. That's what they want. That's the goal. Tommy Robinson's responding to this. Kneecap, the idiot who was chanting on the stage in Glastonbury, he won't be charged after saying, "Kill your local MP" in viral video. So that's interesting considering Lucy Connolly has got jail time for what she did. And what she did is posted something that said, "I don't care if you burn down these houses that house migrants," because she was so frustrated at the actions at, I can't remember the park, the situation where the children were killed and people were thinking it was done by a migrant, but it was done by the a child of the migrants. So very interesting stuff going on there. She's still in jail. This guy won't get any charges. And the two-tier system is meant to be on display to demoralize you. You see this and you understand that you are second class in the eyes of the law. If you say something, what you say is criminal. If you say we shouldn't tolerate this, X, Y, Z, or whatever it is that you say, that's criminal. But if he says it, kill your local MP, that's okay. You could do that. He's pushing the narrative. He's driving the wedge, and you're trying to point out the problem, right? And trying to find a solution. They don't want that. They don't want anybody who's finding solutions, period. Free Speech Union says Labor's secretive working group on Islamophobia has free speech in its crosshairs. I told you. That's why the FSU, I want to be wrong. I don't like to be right, by the way. I want to be wrong. It would be much better to be wrong than to be right, okay? I would love to be totally incorrect about my predictions. Back to this. That's why FSU, Free Speech Union, has written to Angela Rayner raising serious concerns about the group's closed-door operation and the fact that all advice to ministers is marked not to be made public. We've asked the Deputy Prime Minister to disclose the group's full membership, publish any advice received so far, and explain how she intends to reconcile this opaque process with her government's duty to uphold free speech. And if that's not forthcoming, we've made clear we're prepared to take legal action. Here's why this matters. And so they're using the excuse of Islamophobia and, quote, hate to drive the censorship bus. And once the door is open, they can do it. They can say, well, that's Islamophobic. And it doesn't matter what it is or not. And it doesn't matter even what it is. They can just, you're eating a sandwich and they say, that's got bacon on it. That's Islamophobic, right? Done. It's like, well, it was peanut butter and jam and bacon. Mark Nixon says, this is absolutely absurd. So let's talk about the Order of Canada. I was talking yesterday about Don Cherry being robbed of the Order of Canada, not being nominated. And I didn't really get into what's going on with the Order of Canada thing. So what's going on is the Globe and Mail is reporting Theresa Tam, Bonnie Henry among Order of Canada recipients. So yeah, that's weird, right? And Mark says, this is absurd given the information we now know. Yeah, that what they have done in their capacity as Theresa Tam and Bonnie Henry as doctors and as public health experts and things like that has been a terrible, terrible scandal. And they have done absolutely nothing to fix it. And so we're going to give them the Order of Canada. And Nikki says Canada has a habit of awarding the Order of Canada to criminals. First, a convicted sex offender, Peter Dalgish, and then a known Nazi. And now this, the government of Canada has destroyed yet another once prestigious honor. The Order of Canada is now a joke. And yeah, it's true and unfortunate. Here is Chris, and he says, do you know that Theresa Tam was in charge of Biolab 4 in Winnipeg when Ebola and Henipa viruses were sent to the Wuhan lab in China? CPC MP confirms this at committee. Why has Dr. Tam not been arrested? Because she's getting the Order of Canada, man. So that's why she's not been arrested. That's why he's not been arrested. Sean Spear says, Don Cherry is the People's nominee for the Order of Canada. His ongoing exclusion, despite his significant cultural contribution to Canada, speak to the persistent gap between the Laurentian elite and the rest of us. My latest for The Hub, he says. So yeah, it's interesting that they're trying to exclude him. And I guess he's not criminal enough for the Order of Canada, right? Poor Don Cherry. Here's Kyle Kemper. He says the Order of Canada is a reward for cabal compliance. Both Tam and Henry should be investigated for conflicts of interest and crimes against humanity. Yeah, and I think the Presidential Medal of Honor is another one of those things. Like how many? Ellen got one. Didn't Puff Daddy get one too? Right? Like there's all sorts of people who are now facing serious charges or have just disappeared completely from the public view that got Presidential Medals of Honor, and that's notable, right? Interesting. I certainly don't know, but maybe. Certainly plausible, right? Kyle Kemper, what do you think? Mike says the Order of Canada is completely meaningless. Here's Jan Arden, former Order of Canada recipient as well, and she's responding to Tony. Tony says, hey, Jan Arden, how about you keep your opinions to yourself and your like-minded friends? Twitter conservatives would be grateful. It's a free country, and hashtag bacon lover. So I don't know what the conversation was about, but Jan Arden got triggered, and she said, how about you F your eye socket? So Order of Canada, given to super high-end Canadians who are super classy, and Jan Arden. Ridiculous, right? I can't. If there's a Jan Arden song, I don't listen to the radio often, but sometimes I'm in the car and it's on. If there's a Jan Arden song on the radio, I change the radio station because take that, Jan Arden. Made in Canada says $12 for orange juice in Canada. Yeah, it's going to get worse. I hope I'm wrong. It's going to get worse though. And I really hope I'm wrong about that. So we'll see. Apparently this trade deal is going to be a big deal, et cetera, but maybe it'll be a big deal because supply management's over and they're going to try and figure a way to spin that. So we'll see. I don't know. The food professor says Canadian organic pork producer De Breton is calling for mandatory labeling of genetic modified pork in North America because on April 30th, 2025, the FDA approved commercial distribution of pigs genetically modified using CRISPR technology to resist PRRS with entry into the U.S. market expected in 2026. If you eat this, do you then get that power? And how far does that go? Like, are you then resistant to whatever this is, PRRS? Do humans get PRRS? If you take this CRISPRized pig that has this resistance, does that change anything in you at all? Right? Like, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. If you eat somebody who's had the COVID, if you eat something because they're trying to inject mRNA into livestock and things, I've heard of shedding. Do you then, are there, I guess there's nothing live in there. And if you cook it well enough, like it's going to kill anything in there, right? So probably not. But at the same time, have we done any studies? Do we know for sure, right? I didn't think that if somebody else took something that they could shed that to me. I thought that was plausible, but I'd need to see studies. But it wasn't something that I worried about pre-mRNA vaccines and learning about all of that, right? So I have questions about all of this, CRISPR technology and other technologies they're injecting into our food. After learning about the bread and gluten intolerance and finding out that maybe they're just intolerant to all of the crap they do to the flour, maybe messing with the food like this is probably a bad idea. Like, can you get non-CRISPRed pigs? I don't know. PRRS stands for porcine reproductive and respiratory syndrome. Okay, so humans are not at risk for PRRS. It's a highly contagious viral disease that affects pigs. All right. I'd be interested to know what kind of improvement these CRISPR pigs have, and if there's any impact on the humans who have to eat them. Is that everybody? I guess we'll find out soon. But the problem is, if there is a problem, nobody will say maybe it's the CRISPR pigs. Nobody will say that. People will say maybe it's because you're smoking. Maybe it's this. Maybe it's that. And it'll be far too late, and the problem will be so widespread. I mean, people are obese, and nobody's ringing the bell on that. But if you compare the obesity rates of 1950s North America to 2025 North America, there's a drastic and concerning change. And nobody's saying, hold on, everybody, we really got to look at this food. Nobody's saying that, right? So if there's a huge change and people start dying of, I don't know, something, right? Something that's different, but not a virus or something like that, but whatever, people start dying. They're not going to say it's the CRISPR pigs. They're just not going to go that way because they're going to want to keep doing the CRISPR pigs because they're going to say it increases the bottom line. Basically, who cares how many people die? You know that scene in Fight Club where he says if the number of people who die in the payouts are less than a certain number, they just let them die. They just allow that to happen and they just pay it out because the numbers just don't add up. And so if it's over that number, then they do a recall. If it's under that number, they just let people die. And so I feel like they would overlook the CRISPR pigs. Alberta Politics says Canada's $670 billion loss. Since 2015, Canada has lost $670 billion, according to Chris Sims, in lost projects and other things. That's significant. Here we go.
Here's a big one. Canada saw nearly $670 billion fly away since 2015, since Trudeau was elected. $670 billion gone because of either stalled or canceled natural resource projects. Here's a big one. Canada...
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money, honestly. Madness. Here is Alberta Politics, and this is Bruce Pardy and this at the same event. And Bruce Pardy is saying, Alberta's got to leave. Alberta has to leave. In order to maybe save Canada, you have to leave Canada. It's a bad relationship. And it's bad for both of you. You're toxic together, Alberta and Canada. Here's Bruce Pardy.
The problem is not just bad policy. This is national character. This is baked into the Constitution. The real Canada cannot fundamentally reform. And yet, Alberta might, just might, be able to save Canada. You do that by leaving it. Only in the face of an existential political earthquake is there any chance that Canada will face its own problems. And maybe not even then. But pass a referendum, disrupt the country, start a cascade, let the dominoes fall.
Yeah, and however, that is a hard road, and I don't think the powers that be will allow that to manifest. I think they'll do anything they can to stop it, and including pretending being on the side of the people who want to make this come to fruition until the very last minute to stab them in the back. And we've seen it time and again. And so I hope Alberta is prepared, because don't listen to the snake oil salesmen and the people in government who are trying to get you back on board and back on side on the, in a united Canada side. If you want self-determination, those people aren't going to help you. Okay. Maxime Bernier weighs in on this as well. In the Western Standard, Bernier backs Western independence vote after leadership win. In Quebec, those who voted to stay in Canada won by only 51% and nothing happened. We have a worse interventionist federal government now than we had in 1995, so I believe that Albertans must have that referendum on the separation, and they must vote yes, because that would be the only way to tell Ottawa and this establishment party enough is enough. You need to respect the Constitution, said Bernier. Now, that's only the first step, and at almost any process in the process as set out by the federal government can just say, oh, well, not enough support, that's that. And so I don't trust the process. If you vote yes, you're sending Ottawa a message. Yeah, and then they'll try and convince Alberta to stay in the union, and we'll fix it, and there'll be electoral reform, and there'll be this, and there'll be that. And I won't believe it, right? I won't believe it, because I don't think they're negotiating in good faith. DD Politics says Department of Justice Anti-Semitism Task Force Chair Leo Terrell says anyone with an anti-Semitic mindset or intent to incite anti-Semitic violence will not be allowed to enter the United States. He also pledged to work towards eliminating anti-Semitic conduct inside the country. And so this whole push against anti-Semitism is meant to have you on board with it, to agree that they need to intervene in this way against free speech because anti-Semitism is a problem. Now, I'm not saying that Kneecap or whoever this idiot is should have access to the United States. If they want to stop him for publicly inciting violence, sure, fine. But I don't think you need to add the anti-Semitism tag. You can say this guy's publicly inciting violence and he's not coming into the United States on those grounds alone. Doing it the anti-Semitism way gives you carte blanche. They're talking about revoking American. This is our grab bag of American governance, by the way. They're talking about revoking American citizenship of citizens who have been naturalized, so people who came here and whatever, if they engage in anti-Semitism, right? And it's the same as the Islamophobia, right? If the person's a violent terrorist, sure, strip them of their citizenship and send them back to their home country. I have no problem with that. But this anti-Semitism thing gives carte blanche, rubber stamp to the allegation that you're an anti-Semite, and now we can do whatever we want with you. And I don't agree with that. So sure, keep this guy out, kick this guy out. I'm just saying this is raising red flags for me, anti-Semitism task force, right? I don't know, man. That's, it seems like we could get a situation where they're using that as an excuse and just having dictatorship run ripshot over everything. The big, beautiful bill, one big, beautiful bill, I don't know if it actually passed. There were a whole bunch of people talking about how the one big, beautiful bill was going to pass, and we're right on the cusp of it passing, and we just have to get it passed, and there's 4 holdouts, and people were saying that the bill is flawed. Elon Musk doesn't like it. Elon Musk says if this insane spending bill passes, the American Party will be formed the next day. Our country needs an alternative to the Democrat-Republican uniparty so that the people can actually have a voice. Clandestine says we already did that. It's called MAGA. Trump already expelled the Bush-McCain neocons faction of the GOP and has taken over and reshaped the party. To a degree, I agree with that. And also, Clandestine says, a couple of months ago, Elon was crying about tariffs. Since then, the market has already fully recovered, and we have already brought in $88 billion in revenue. The tariffs have also granted Trump leverage in negotiations, which he has parlayed into economic and peace deals. All the people who said Trump didn't know what he was doing, including Elon, are now eating crow. So I don't like the big, beautiful bill either. I don't think so. I don't think it's very good. There's a whole bunch of things that it gives away that it shouldn't be giving away. And there's lots of criticism. There's lots of criticism that's legitimate of it. And so I think that it's interesting what's going on with it. And again, I don't have any update on whether it's passed or not. I know they were trying to get it passed yesterday. They were trying to get that last vote done. It passed some hurdles, but I don't think it was completely done. And so I don't know what's going to happen with it. It seems, like I said, it seems like there's some legitimate criticisms. But if Elon Musk creates an American party, I don't know that that's going to fix anything, because it offers another alternative, but it doesn't fix the core root of the problem. And part of what the big, beautiful bill does or whatever is, I often talk about, you have to acknowledge where you are. And so like weight loss or a budget, if you spend $4,000 a day for whatever reason, and then you have to spend only $2,000 a day, that's going to feel very, very restrictive. You're going to itch under that. You're going to be like, well, I used to be able to afford this. Like yesterday, I could afford this now. And you're going to you're not going to do what is necessary. And the voters, more accurately, the companies that spend that money based on the old policies will have to retool. People will lose their jobs. And those voters that lose their jobs will not think the Trump administration is doing a good job. So you have to bring it down slowly while you ramp something else up that replaces it slowly. And so if the big, beautiful bill is doing that, and that's what Trump is trying to accomplish, then he should communicate that better. And I've said this before, right? And Trump always seems to come out winning, and it doesn't matter how he communicated before he won. After he wins, he's like, well, it doesn't matter now, so whatever, who cares? And he does the same thing next time. So who knows how it's going to play out? I don't know how it's going to play out. We'll see. There seems to be a big battle, but I think that Elon Musk starting an American party is not going to necessarily work, and we'll see. We'll have to see, right? Bob Dole, they were in the 90s, they tried, very rich people were trying to start a third party to combat the Democrat-Republican thing that had been going on, and it failed, and it split the vote and gave Democrats an in, right? And so blah, blah, blah. I'm not even arguing vote splitting or anything like that. I'm just saying that in the American context, I don't know that that's going to be the solution that catches fire. And I think that Trump's proven that going in and reforming a party is easier than standing up a party from scratch. Libs of TikTok is talking about Department of Education. They say California Department of Education says that the Trump administration notified them that billions of dollars of funding is being withheld. California has repeatedly pushed policies allowing males to invade female spaces and promote DEI, CRT, and LGBT propaganda. And the FAFO, right? The California Department of Education just received word that billions of dollars appropriated by Congress for the coming school year are being illegally impounded by the Trump administration. Follow our continued updates. or follow for continued updates. Delicious. I mean, I didn't vote for any of this, but this is the stuff I like to see, right? Like, bravo. This is fun. I wish we could do this. This is the stuff I would do. If I was the Premier of Ontario, day one, baby, we don't have every single director of education is fired. Every single principal is fired. They could come back. The principals, I think that there are some good principals. There are some good on the ground principals. There are some great on the ground teachers. Absolutely. But I would want them to be, the principals I think would work under the umbrella of the province to make sure that the schools are teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic and not backdooring any LGBT, anything like that. But fundamentally, the trustees are made of the kids' parents, the kids in the school's parents. Those trustees and the principal hire the teachers, and in that way you have accountability to the parents, and you hopefully have great schools that turn out really productive, smart kids who are able to be competent and solve real world problems in a competent way. Because that's really the goal, right? So having ideologues who are able to protest, that's not the goal. Oh man, I gotta hurry up. Okay, here's RFK Jr. talking about how hepatitis B shots, which are given to babies for no good reason at all because they're not at risk of getting a hepatitis B, are causing autism. Here we go. And the CDC covered it up.
What you would do if you wanted to find the answer, which is to compare outcomes in a fully vaccinated group to health outcomes in an unvaccinated group. And CDC did that study in 1999. They brought in a team of scientists under a Belgian researcher named Thomas Verstraeten, and they looked at the data. They looked at children who had received the hepatitis vaccine within the first 30 days of life, and compare those children to children who had received the vaccine later or not at all. And they found an 135% elevated risk of autism among the vaccinated children. And it shocked them. They kept the study secret, and then they manipulated it through 5 different iterations to try to bury the link. And, we know how they did it. They got rid of all the older children, essentially, and just had younger children who were too young to be diagnosed. And they stratified the data, and they did a lot of other tricks. And all of those studies were the subject of that kind of trickery.
Right. And so if you were watching Matlock or Columbo, and Columbo would say one more thing, or Matlock would have the guy on the stand, and he'd say, "Oh, right, but you had motive, and you had the motivation, and you had the opportunity. It's a slam dunk." And the jury is like, "Hold on, we've decided that this person is guilty, right? The audience knows this person is guilty, and Matlock's got him dead to rights." Kennedy just described. We know what they did. We know that they knew, and we know how they scrubbed the data. We got him. We got him. Where's the arrest? Where's the arrest? Where's the arrest? I'm only disappointed because there's no arrest, right? So here's Senator Rand Paul. He says, "I'm currently working with Kash Patel to investigate Dr. Fauci and his malfeasance in office." So Dr. Tam gets the Order of Canada, is it the Order of Canada? The Order of Canada. And Fauci gets investigated by the FBI. One of these things is not like the other. It's a little weird, right? Here's Kash Patel talking about this.
I mean, we just had a great breakthrough this week on Fauci. So Senator Rand Paul, Senator Kennedy, and I hate naming names because I always forget people, are doing a great job with us on COVID origins. And we've got multiple investigations open on that. But they had always been looking for Fauci's original phone, or not original, but phones and devices he used while he was Fauci back in Trump 1 during COVID. And nobody had found it till 2 days ago.
Really?
Yeah. Now, look, your audience and everybody listening to it shouldn't jump to the conclusion everything's in there. We'll look at it. We'll pull it. We'll rip it, as we say. And maybe it's deleted. Maybe it's not. But at least we found it. And at least now we can tell the American people we've been looking, because it is of public importance to figure out, did that guy lie? Did he intentionally mislead the world and cause countless deaths? We owe those answers to the American people. And the best evidence ever is always the people's evidence who created it. And so now we're going to go and exploit those hard drives. But I think a victory for the American people that we broke with Congress is that we did find it. We're not done. We're still looking. And
I was hoping they had some kind of case built and they were going to come in and, execute the case they'd been building for the last 4 years. Oh, well, more fool me. Okay, the last one for today. This is our moment of Zen for Canada Day. And this is hilarious. I hope this is true. You have to take stuff like this with a grain of salt because maybe it's not the mushrooms, okay? But maybe it is the mushrooms. And if it's the mushrooms, I want a symphony of mushrooms. Here is Phoenix, and they say, engineers from the United Kingdom have taught mushrooms to play musical instruments. Everything works due to special sensors that read electrical impulses in the caps and then turn it into commands for the motors to tap the keys on the piano. So the mushrooms are playing this. They've got little drumsticks. No, they've got little, I don't know what they're called, batons. I don't know what they're called. You would use them to hit like a child's toy, right? Like you'd recognize these things if you could see them. And they use them to tap the keys on the keyboard. And when it zooms out, you can see other mushrooms sitting on shelves. And I wonder to myself, like, can those other mushrooms play other instruments? Like, is one a bass guitarist? Like, do we have, are the mushrooms being catty about these mushrooms' talent? Are these the best mushrooms, or are there better mushrooms? And what kind of music can they all make together? Here's the Mushroom Symphony. And I mean, okay, it's all one mushroom, I guess. Is it all one mushroom, or do they have two mushrooms? Because there's two apparatuses here, right? Like, what if this guy's doing something and the other mushroom's like, bing, and he's like, listen, I'm doing something here. It's like bing, 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 and you're binging, and I didn't want that. Stop. And how do these mushrooms feel about all of this music, right? So I don't know. I feel like... Also, you have to believe that the scientists aren't influencing the mushrooms and their music. And so I choose to believe. I choose to believe in the mushrooms. All right, that's enough out of me. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for your support. I'll be off for the next few days. I'll be back on Sunday. So thanks for watching, and have a wonderful